The morning of what should have been the happiest day of my life, I stood in front of the mirror adjusting my wedding dress for the last time. By evening, I would be dead. By tomorrow morning, I would be reborn with a chance to rewrite everything. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. The cathedral bells of St. Michael's rang across downtown Chicago as I smoothed the silk of my wedding gown one final time. 3 years of planning had led to this moment: my marriage to Marcus Wellington, heir to the Wellington media empire, and the man I'd loved since college. "You look absolutely radiant, sweetheart." My mother, Patricia Blackwood, adjusted my veil with tears in her eyes. The Blackwood name carried weight in Chicago's financial district, but today it would be united with the Wellington legacy. "Marcus is so lucky to have you." I touched the diamond necklace at my throat, a family heirloom worth more than most people's houses. "I just want everything to be perfect, Mom. This day means everything to me." Outside the bridal suite, I could hear the murmur of 300 guests filling the cathedral. Chicago's elite had gathered to witness the union of two powerful families. My father, Charles Blackwood, had built his investment firm from nothing, and today his only daughter would marry into one of the most influential media dynasties in America. 20 minutes before the ceremony, my maid of honor, Jessica Chen, burst through the door with panic written across her face. "Sophia, we have a problem. Marcus isn't in the groom's suite." My heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean he isn't there? Where is he?" "The groomsmen don't know. His best man, Tyler, said he stepped out to take a call an hour ago and never came back." I lifted my dress and hurried down the corridor, my designer heels clicking against the marble floor. The cathedral was a maze of preparation rooms and side chambers, and I searched each one with growing desperation. Finally, I heard voices coming from the small chapel behind the main altar, a private space meant for intimate ceremonies. Through the crack in the door, I saw him, Marcus Wellington, devastatingly handsome in his custom tuxedo, holding the hands of a woman in a simple cream-colored dress. But it wasn't just any woman. It was Emma Rodriguez, his college sweetheart, the one he claimed was just a friend whenever her name came up. "I've waited 3 years for you to realize this," Emma was saying, tears streaming down her face. "I never stopped loving you, Marcus, even when you got engaged to her." Marcus cupped her face in his hands. "I know, baby. I know. This whole engagement was just what our families expected. You're the one I've always loved. You're the one I want to spend my life with. But the wedding, all those people, your family will disown you. Let them. The Wellington fortune isn't worth losing you again. I made that mistake once in college when I let family pressure tear us apart. I won't make it again." My blood turned to ice as I watched the man I'd given 3 years of my life to kiss another woman with more passion than he'd ever shown me. The engagement ring on my finger, a 10-carat diamond that had belonged to his grandmother, suddenly felt like a weight dragging me down. "What about Sophia?" Emma whispered against his lips. Marcus's expression hardened. "Sophia Blackwood is everything my family wants in a daughter-in-law. She's beautiful, educated, from the right family. But she's cold, Emma, she's calculated. Everything about our relationship has been a business transaction. She doesn't love me. She loves the idea of being Mrs. Wellington." The words hit me like physical blows. Cold? Calculated? I'd spent 3 years molding myself into what I thought was his perfect woman. I'd given up my dream of opening my own art gallery to work in the family business. I'd attended every society function, charmed every business associate, played the role of the ideal fiancé. "You should have seen her planning this wedding," Marcus continued with a bitter laugh. "Every detail had to be perfect, every guest list reviewed 3 times. She cares more about the spectacle than the marriage. You want to know the truth? I don't think she'd even be upset if I called it off. She'd probably just be embarrassed about the inconvenience." I stumbled backward, my hand flying to my mouth to stifle a sob. How could he think so little of me? How could he believe I was incapable of real love when I'd restructured my entire life around making him happy? So what do we do? Emma asked. We leave. Right now. I've got a chartered plane waiting at Midway. We can be in Costa Rica by tonight, married by tomorrow. Start fresh where no one can find us. And leave her at the altar? Marcus shrugged with a callousness that made my stomach turn. She'll survive. The Blackwood family has enough money to recover from the embarrassment. In 6 months, this will all be forgotten. And she'll probably thank me for saving her from a loveless marriage. I watched in horror as the man I'd planned to spend my life with kissed his first love goodbye and promised to meet her at the airport. My legs felt like water as I retreated to my bridal suite, my mind reeling with the devastation of what I'd just witnessed. But the betrayal was just the beginning. Sophia, where have you been? Jessica rushed to my side as I stumbled back into the room. The ceremony starts in 10 minutes and… Oh my God, what's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost. Before I could answer, my phone buzzed with a text message. My hands shook as I read the words that would shatter my world completely. Sophia, I'm sorry, I can't go through with this. By the time you read this, I'll be gone. I hope someday you'll understand that this is better for both of us. Clee. The room spun around me as the full weight of the situation crashed down. 300 guests were waiting in the cathedral. My parents had spent $250,000 on this wedding. The media was here to cover the union of two of Chicago's most prominent families. And I was about to be humiliated in front of everyone I'd ever known. Jessica, I need you to listen carefully, I said, my voice surprisingly steady despite the chaos in my mind. Marcus is gone. He's not coming back. I need you to tell my parents quietly, and we need to figure out how to handle this disaster. What I didn't know was that the disaster was far from over. What I didn't know was that this betrayal would set in motion a chain of events that would destroy everything I held dear, cost me my life, and ultimately give me a second chance to rewrite my destiny. But first, I had to survive the nightmare that this day was about to become. The cathedral fell into an eerie silence as my father walked to the altar microphone. Charles Blackwood, a man who had commanded boardrooms for 30 years, looked smaller than I'd ever seen him as he faced the sea of expectant faces. Ladies and gentlemen, his voice cracked slightly. Due to unforeseen circumstances, today's ceremony has been postponed indefinitely. We apologize for any inconvenience and ask for your understanding during this difficult time. The murmur that followed was deafening. 300 of Chicago's most powerful people began whispering, pulling out phones and craning their necks to understand what had happened. I watched from behind the sanctuary curtain as society reporters scribbled frantically in their notebooks. Mrs. Eleanor Wellington, Marcus's mother, stood abruptly from the front pew. Her face was a mask of fury as she marched toward my parents. Even from a distance, I could see the venom in her eyes. "Where is my son?" she demanded, her voice carrying across the cathedral. "What kind of circus are you people running?" My mother, Patricia, tried to maintain her composure. "Eleanor, perhaps we should discuss this privately." "Privately?" Mrs. Wellington's laugh was sharp and cold. "You've just embarrassed the Wellington family in front of half of Chicago's elite. There will be nothing private about this disaster." My father stepped between them. "Our children made their own choices, Eleanor. The Blackwood family is as devastated as yours." But I knew the truth was worse than anyone realized. While my parents scrambled to manage the immediate crisis, I had retreated to the bridal suite where Jessica was frantically fielding calls from confused vendors and guests. "The reception venue is asking if they should still serve dinner," she said, hanging up the phone. "The photographer wants to know if we're doing family photos. Sophia, what do I tell them?" Before I could answer, my phone rang. The caller ID made my stomach drop. Victoria Blackwood, my father's sister and the family's crisis management specialist. "Sophia, I'm watching the news coverage right now. Channel 7 is already running the story. Blackwood wedding disaster. Groom abandons bride at altar. We need damage control immediately." I sank into a chair, still wearing my wedding dress. "Aunt Victoria, I don't know what to do. Everything is falling apart. Listen to me carefully. The next 48 hours will determine whether the Blackwood name survives this scandal. I'm calling an emergency board meeting for Monday morning. Your father's investors are already nervous about the Pemberton merger, and this kind of public humiliation could tank the deal." The Pemberton merger. I'd forgotten about my father's biggest business venture, a $2.3 billion acquisition that would make Blackwood Investments one of the largest firms on the West Coast. But deals at that level required absolute confidence from investors, and public scandals had a way of making billionaires very nervous. "How bad is it?" I asked, though I dreaded the answer. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. Bad. The Wellington family is already distancing themselves from us. Marcus's disappearance isn't just a personal embarrassment, it's a professional catastrophe. 3 of our biggest clients have Wellington connections. As if summoned by my worst fears, my father appeared in the doorway. His face was ashen, and he was clutching his phone with white knuckles. "Sophia, we need to talk, now." Jessica and my mother quietly left the room as my father closed the door behind him. When he turned to face me, I saw something I'd never seen before. Defeat. "Richard Pemberton just called," he said quietly. "He's pulling out of the merger." The words hit me like a physical blow. "What? Why?" "He said he can't risk associating his company with a family that can't manage their own personal affairs. The board is concerned about our judgment, our stability. Sophia, this merger was going to secure our family's legacy for generations." I felt the walls closing in around me. "Dad, I'm so sorry. I had no idea Marcus was going to." He held up a hand. "It gets worse. 3 of our major investors called during the ceremony. They're demanding emergency meetings to reassess their portfolios. The whispers are already starting that the Blackwood family is in decline." My mother returned with tear-stained cheeks. "The Wellington family attorney just called. They're demanding the return of all family heirlooms, including the engagement ring and the necklace you're wearing." I touched the diamond necklace at my throat, the one I'd admired just hours earlier. Now it felt like a noose. "They're also releasing a statement to the press," my father continued, claiming that Marcus discovered, quote, "fundamental incompatibilities that made marriage impossible." They're painting him as the victim who escaped an unsuitable match. The injustice of it all made my blood boil. Unsuitable? After 3 years of me adapting to every one of their expectations? But my father wasn't finished. "There's more, sweetheart. The story is already trending on social media. Someone leaked photos of you in your wedding dress standing alone at the altar. The hashtags are unflattering." I grabbed my phone and immediately regretted it. Twitter was exploding with hashtag Blackwood wedding fail and hashtag abandoned bride. The photos were everywhere. Me looking devastated in my wedding gown, my father's defeated announcement, the empty space where Marcus should have been standing. The comments were brutal. "Guess money can't buy you love. She probably drove him away with her controlling personality. The Blackwood princess finally gets what she deserves. How did these photos get out so fast?" I whispered. My mother's face darkened. "Eleanor Wellington had her own photographer there. She's using this as ammunition to protect her son's reputation." The next few hours passed in a blur of humiliation and damage control. The wedding vendors needed to be paid despite the canceled ceremony. The honeymoon reservations had to be canceled. The engagement announcements that had run in society magazines now looked like monuments to my naivete. But the personal humiliation was nothing compared to the professional consequences. By Sunday evening, my father had received calls from 8 different clients expressing concerns about Blackwood Investments' stability. The company's stock price had dropped 12% in after-hours trading. 30 years of building this company, my father said as we sat in his study that night. 30 years of reputation and relationships, and it could all disappear because of one day. I was still wearing my wedding dress, unable to bring myself to take it off. "Dad, there has to be something we can do. Some way to fix this." He looked at me with exhausted eyes. "Sophia, you don't understand how this world works. In our circles, perception is reality. Once people start questioning your judgment, your stability, your worthiness, it spreads like cancer. The Wellington family has already started telling people that Marcus discovered troubling things about our family's business practices." "What kind of things?" "Lies. But it doesn't matter. They have more influence than we do. By the time the truth comes out, we'll be destroyed." As I finally climbed the stairs to my childhood bedroom, I realized that Marcus's betrayal was just the first domino to fall. My family's reputation, my father's life's work, our financial security, it was all crumbling because of one man's cowardice and another family's vindictiveness. I fell asleep that night still in my wedding dress, tears staining the silk as I stared at the ceiling. I had no idea that worse was yet to come. I had no idea that the Wellingtons weren't finished with their revenge. And I had no idea that within 24 hours, everything I thought I knew about my life would be turned upside down in ways I never could have imagined. The girl who had woken up that morning expecting to become Mrs. Wellington would never exist again. 6 months after my rebirth, I stood in the penthouse boardroom of Sterling Industries, watching through floor-to-ceiling windows as moving trucks loaded the last of Wellington Media's equipment from the building across the street. The irony wasn't lost on me. From this vantage point, I could see the exact spot where Marcus had once promised me the world. "The final transfer documents are ready for your signature, Mrs. Sterling." My assistant Grace placed the leather portfolio on the mahogany table. After acquiring Wellington Media's assets, I had officially become the majority shareholder in what was now Sterling Communications, Chicago's most powerful media conglomerate. Alexander entered the boardroom with that confident stride that had first caught my attention at the charity auction. Watching the vultures pick at the carcass, I turned from the window, unable to suppress a smile. More like watching justice finally being served. He wrapped his arms around me from behind, and I leaned into his warmth. The 6 months since our whirlwind romance began had been a blur of business acquisitions, passionate nights, and the systematic dismantling of everyone who had wronged me in my previous life. "Speaking of justice," Alexander murmured against my ear, "I have news about Marcus." My pulse quickened. What kind of news? "He tried to contact Emma yesterday. Apparently, paradise in Costa Rica isn't quite what he expected when you're living on stolen money and watching your family empire crumble from afar." The satisfaction that coursed through me was intoxicating. "And Emma?" "Refused to take his call. Seems she's found herself a wealthy coffee plantation owner and has no interest in reliving past mistakes." I turned in his arms to face him fully. "You know what the best part is? In my first life, I spent 3 years trying to be perfect for someone who saw me as a business transaction. But you've loved me exactly as I am from the moment we met." Alexander's eyes softened. "Sophia, you've never been more beautiful than when you're being completely yourself. Ruthless, brilliant, passionate. Everything Marcus was too weak to appreciate." "Mrs. Sterling?" Grace's voice interrupted our moment. "Your father is here to see you." I straightened my blazer and nodded. "Send him in." Charles Blackwood entered the boardroom looking healthier and more confident than I'd seen him in years. The stress lines that had appeared after the wedding disaster had faded, replaced by the proud bearing of a man whose family had not only survived scandal but emerged stronger than ever. "Sweetheart, I wanted to discuss the final phase of the expansion," he said, settling into one of the leather chairs. "With Wellington Media's broadcast licenses now under our control, we're positioned to launch the national network next quarter." Blackwood Communications had evolved far beyond my father's original investment firm. By combining his financial expertise with my media acquisitions and Alexander's technology innovations, we'd created an empire that spanned traditional media, digital platforms, and cutting-edge AI communications technology. "The board meeting is set for Thursday," I replied, taking my seat at the head of the table. "We'll officially announce the Sterling Blackwood National Network." Alexander joined us, pulling out his tablet. "The preliminary audience research is phenomenal. We're projected to capture 35% market share within the first year." My father leaned back with satisfaction. "Who would have thought that Marcus abandoning you at the altar would turn out to be the best thing that ever happened to our family? If only he knew the whole truth, that I'd lived through one version of this story where that abandonment led to our complete destruction. Where I'd died broken and penniless while the Wellingtons celebrated their victory. This time, armed with the knowledge of their methods and the love of a man who truly valued me, I'd rewritten our destiny entirely." "There's one more thing," Alexander said, his tone shifting to something more serious. The private investigator finished his report on the Wellington family's current situation. He slid a folder across the table, and I opened it to find photographs and financial documents that told the story of complete downfall. Eleanor Wellington, once the queen of Chicago society, had been forced to sell their lakefront mansion and move to a modest condo in the suburbs. The family's charitable foundation had been dissolved due to lack of funds. Their social standing had evaporated along with their fortune. Marcus himself is particularly interesting, Alexander continued. He's been trying to get a job in media for months, but somehow every potential employer receives anonymous tips about his unreliability and questionable character. I closed the folder, feeling a sense of completion wash over me. And his attempts to contact me? 23 phone calls, 47 text messages, and 12 emails in the past month, Grace reported efficiently. All blocked as per your instructions. He also tried to approach you at the charity gala last week, but security escorted him out. What did the messages say? My father asked, his jaw tightening with protective anger. Alexander's expression darkened. Apologies, mostly. Claims that he made a mistake, that he never stopped loving her, that Emma manipulated him. The usual desperation of a man who's lost everything and realizes what he threw away. I stood and walked back to the window, looking down at the bustling Chicago streets. You know what's funny? In my previous life, I would have given anything to hear him say those words. I would have taken him back despite everything he'd done to me. And now? Alexander asked, though he already knew the answer. Now I realize that love isn't about forgiveness without consequences. It's about choosing someone who chooses you every single day, someone who builds you up instead of tearing you down, someone who sees your strength as an asset, not a threat. My phone buzzed with yet another blocked call from Marcus. I showed the screen to Alexander, who simply raised an eyebrow. Should we consider a restraining order? He asked. I shook my head. Let him keep calling. Let him live with the knowledge that the woman he discarded built an empire while he lost everything. That's punishment enough. Grace appeared in the doorway again. Mrs. Sterling, the wedding planner is here for your final consultation. My heart skipped a beat. After 6 months of business conquests and personal growth, Alexander and I were finally ready to plan our own wedding. But this time it would be different in every way that mattered. Small ceremony, I'd told the planner during our first meeting. Intimate, meaningful, focused on the commitment rather than the spectacle. Alexander took my hand as we walked toward the conference room. No cold feet this time? I laughed, squeezing his fingers. How could I have cold feet about marrying the man who helped me become the best version of myself? Even though I encouraged your ruthless takeover of your ex-fiancé's family business? Especially because of that. As we entered the room to finalize plans for our wedding, I caught my reflection in the mirror-polished table. The woman looking back at me bore little resemblance to the naive girl who had once planned her life around someone else's expectations. This woman was powerful, confident, and loved by a man who celebrated her strength rather than fearing it. In my previous life, I had died believing that love meant sacrifice and compromise until nothing of yourself remained. But rebirth had taught me that true love meant finding someone who inspired you to become more than you ever imagined possible. Marcus Wellington had been my greatest mistake and my greatest teacher. By abandoning me at the altar, he'd freed me to find my real destiny. And now, as I prepared to marry Alexander Sterling in a ceremony that would unite two powerful families in genuine partnership, rather than convenient arrangement, I realized that sometimes the worst thing that happens to you turns out to be the best thing that could have happened. The girl who had once begged for scraps of affection from a man who saw her as a business transaction was gone forever. In her place stood a woman who had built an empire, destroyed her enemies, and found a love worth fighting for. And this time, I was walking toward my future with absolute certainty that I was exactly where I belonged. The wedding planner, Miranda Hayes, spread fabric samples across the mahogany table with practiced elegance. For the altar backdrop, I recommend ivory silk with touches of champagne gold. It will complement the natural lighting in the Sterling family chapel beautifully. Alexander's family chapel. Unlike the grand cathedral where I'd been humiliated before, this intimate stone sanctuary on the Sterling estate held only 40 guests maximum. Every person invited would be there because they genuinely celebrated our union, not because of social obligations or business networking. The guest list is finalized at 36, Miranda continued, consulting her tablet, including the photographer you specifically requested, the one who specializes in capturing authentic emotions rather than posed perfection. I smiled at that detail. My first wedding had been about creating the perfect image for society magazines. This celebration would focus on documenting real joy, genuine laughter, and the kind of candid moments that actually mattered. What about the menu? Alexander asked, his hand finding mine under the table. Chef Martinelli has designed a 5-course tasting menu featuring ingredients from local farms, Miranda replied. Nothing pretentious or overly elaborate. Comfort food elevated to art, as you requested. My father cleared his throat from across the table. Speaking of celebrations, there's something else we need to discuss. The Wall Street Journal wants to do a feature story on our family's business transformation. They're calling it The Phoenix Dynasty, How the Blackwoods Rose from Scandal to Success. The irony made me laugh softly. A year ago, those same reporters were writing obituaries for our reputation. The reporter assigned is Jennifer Crawford, my father continued. She covered your previous wedding situation. Now she wants to explore how we turn disaster into triumph. Alexander squeezed my hand gently. Are you comfortable with that level of exposure? I considered the question carefully. In my past life, I would have hidden from media attention, afraid of judgment and criticism. But this version of myself had learned to control the narrative rather than being controlled by it. Actually, I think it's perfect timing, I decided. Let the world see what real success looks like. What it means to build something meaningful instead of just inheriting it. Miranda nodded approvingly. The article could run just before your wedding announcement. Excellent publicity for the Sterling Blackwood Alliance. There's more, my father said, his eyes twinkling with pride. Harvard Business School wants you to guest lecture next month. The topic: Strategic Resilience in Crisis Management. The invitation felt like the ultimate validation. To go from society scandal to Harvard lecturer in less than 2 years demonstrated a complete reversal of fortune that even I sometimes struggled to believe. They want me to share how we transformed a personal crisis into a business opportunity, I mused. How we used our pain as fuel for innovation rather than letting it destroy us. Alexander stood and walked to the window, his silhouette framed against the Chicago skyline. You know what I find most remarkable? Marcus had every advantage. Family wealth, established business connections, social status. But he threw it all away because he couldn't appreciate what he had. While you built everything from nothing, I added, joining him at the window. Sterling Industries started in your grandfather's garage, and now it's valued at $12 billion. $13.7 billion as of this morning's market close, he corrected with a grin. The acquisition of Wellington's broadcast licenses pushed us over the threshold. Miranda gathered her materials with satisfaction. I'll finalize these arrangements and send you the updated timeline. Your wedding will be absolutely perfect, Mrs. Sterling to be. After she left, the three of us sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over the city we now dominated. Chicago looked different from this height, manageable, conquerable, full of possibilities rather than threats. Sweetheart, my father said eventually, I need to tell you something. Yesterday, I received a call from Eleanor Wellington. My blood chilled slightly. What did she want? She's desperate. The family is 3 months behind on their condo rent. She asked if we might consider offering Marcus a position at Blackwood Communications. The audacity was breathtaking. And what did you tell her? I told her that personnel decisions rest entirely with you, as the company's chief executive officer. His smile was sharp. But I may have mentioned that we only hire people with impeccable character references. Alexander chuckled darkly. I'm sure Marcus's reference letters from Costa Rica are fascinating reading. The beautiful thing, I said, feeling a deep sense of closure settling over me, is that I don't have to actively destroy him anymore. He's doing that perfectly well himself. My phone buzzed with a news alert. Wellington Family Trust declares bankruptcy. I showed the screen to Alexander and my father, and we shared a moment of quiet satisfaction. You know what tomorrow is? Alexander asked suddenly. I tilted my head, curious. Exactly 1 year since the day Marcus left you at the altar. The significance hit me like lightning. In 12 months, I had gone from the most humiliated woman in Chicago to one of the most powerful. From abandoned bride to media mogul. From victim to victor. And in exactly 60 days, I replied, touching my engagement ring, a stunning emerald surrounded by diamonds that Alexander had designed specifically for me. I'll be Mrs. Alexander Sterling. Any regrets? He asked softly. I looked around the boardroom that represented everything I'd built, at the man who'd helped me become stronger than I ever imagined possible, at my father whose pride in me was unmistakable. Only one, I said. I regret that it took betrayal to show me what I was really capable of. But even that regret felt hollow. Because sometimes the worst thing that happens to you is exactly what needed to happen to create the life you were meant to live. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.